The stars themselves seemed tired of war. For 3,000 years, the Volosian Collective and Archean Imperium had battled across the spiral arms of the galaxy, their once magnificent civilizations now defined by a single, endless conflict. Commander Ilara Kavash stood motionless before the strategic display, her silver-scaled skin reflecting the crimson emergency lights that bathed the command center. The latest battle projections told a familiar story, another devastating defeat, another strategic retreat. The Volosian flagship had barely escaped the Archean ambush in the Centauri Nexus, limping back to headquarters with nearly half its crew lost. Casualty estimates exceed 2 billion, her second-in-command reported, his voice hollow with exhaustion. The civilian evacuation was only 30% complete when their quantum destroyers breached our defensive line. Ilara closed her inner eyelids, a gesture her species made when processing grief. 2 billion more lives. Ancestors, when would it end? The Volosian High Command bunker fell silent except for the soft hum of quantum computers calculating their dwindling chances of survival. The 7th Fleet is completely lost, another officer announced, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with distress signals. Admiral Thrix activated the Void protocols rather than surrender. Another 80,000 of their finest, choosing oblivion over capture. Ilara couldn't blame them. The Archeans had long ago abandoned any pretense of humane treatment for prisoners. The strategic simulations suggest we have 14 stellar cycles before total collapse of our defensive perimeter, the tactical officer stated. The High Council requests immediate recommendations. 14 cycles, not even enough time for a new generation of Volosians to emerge from the birthing chambers. Their species faced extinction unless something changed, dramatically and immediately. The Architect's prophecy speaks of outliers, whispered Trell, her oldest advisor and former mentor. His exoskeleton had grown dull with age, the once brilliant patterns now barely visible. Species that evolve along unexpected paths. Ilara knew immediately which species he meant. The Sentinel probes had been monitoring thousands of developing civilizations, searching for potential allies. Most followed predictable evolutionary and technological paths, but a few defied all models. The humans. She turned to face him directly. They barely understand gravitational manipulation. Their fastest ships would take decades to cross distances our civilian transports cover in minutes. Yet they survived catastrophes that should have extinguished them a dozen times over. Trell countered, shuffling forward to manipulate the display controls with trembling appendages. The galactic map zoomed toward a tiny, unremarkable spiral arm. A single yellow star, a fragile blue planet. Their historical records show adaptation rates that defy evolutionary models, he continued. They've survived planetary cataclysms, nuclear brinkmanship, biological threats, climate disasters, always finding solutions where our models predict extinction. The display showed humans fighting humans, primitive conflicts using chemical propellants and combustion engines. But Ilara saw what Trell wanted her to see, wildly unpredictable strategies, innovative adaptations, unconventional thinking. Their thought patterns are chaotic, she observed. Their tactical doctrines change completely within single generations. Precisely. Trell's voice gained strength. The Archeans predict our every move because we think like them, logically, optimally, predictably. These humans, he gestured at the displays where human armies employed guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare, and psychological operations. They don't. Commander Ilara Kavash studied the images from this distant, primitive world. Desperate times required desperate measures. Perhaps the answer to a 3,000-year war lay in the most unexpected place imaginable. Prepare a diplomatic vessel, she ordered, making her decision. I want to see these humans for myself. Dr. Maya Okafor had imagined first contact thousands of times throughout her scientific career. None of those scenarios involved being dragged from sleep at 3:17 a.m., still wearing mismatched pajamas, to face elegant crystalline beings in the hastily assembled diplomatic chamber beneath Geneva. The objects entered Earth orbit 17 minutes ago. General Chen whispered beside her as they hurried down the corridor. 3 vessels. Completely disabled our defense grid without firing a shot. They're requesting to speak with our leadership. Maya smoothed her rumpled University of Lagos t-shirt, wishing she'd had time to change. As director of the United Earth Defense Initiative's Xenobiology Division, she prepared for this moment, just not in sleepwear with her hair wrapped in a faded scarf. The diplomatic chamber had been converted from a nuclear bunker decades earlier, optimistically designed for a first contact that most believed would never come. Now its polished marble floor reflected the glow from the 3 translucent figures waiting inside. The aliens stood nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies resembling humanoid forms crafted from living crystal. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed beneath their transparent exoskeletons in complex, hypnotic sequences. Dr. Okafor, the lead figure, acknowledged, its voice resonating with harmonic overtones. I am Cheryl, diplomatic envoy of the Volosian Collective. We apologize for the abrupt arrival, but circumstances necessitate directness. Maya glanced at the hastily assembled human delegation, military officers, government officials, and scientists, all looking equally disheveled and stunned. Let me understand this correctly, Maya said, trying to maintain composure as Earth's hastily appointed representative. You've been observing humanity for centuries, and now you want our help in a war that spans half the galaxy. The alien, Cheryl, inclined its crested head. We offer knowledge of faster-than-light travel, gravity manipulation, and medical technologies that would eliminate disease on your world. General Ibrahim Chen, seated beside Maya, leaned forward. And in exchange, you want what exactly? Our weapons are primitive compared to yours. Our military doctrine is designed for planetary defense, not interstellar warfare. We don't need your technology, Cheryl replied, crystalline fingers gesturing elegantly. We need your thinking. At a motion from the alien, projected holograms sprang to life around the room, recordings of Earth's military history. Ancient battles from Rome to revolutionary guerrilla tactics to modern hybrid warfare. Your species approaches conflict differently, Cheryl continued. You embrace chaos, unpredictability. You value what you call thinking outside the box. The Orcs and Volosians both evolved from hive-minded ancestors. Our neural structures default to optimization patterns. But you, the alien, gestured toward the humans. Your minds work in ways neither of our species understands. Maya exchanged glances with General Chen. The room had fallen completely silent as the implications settled in. You traveled 27 light-years to recruit military advisors, she finally asked. We traveled 27 light-years to save our civilization, Cheryl corrected. And perhaps yours as well. The Arctians see all other intelligent life as resources to be harvested. If we fall, Earth will eventually follow. The alien moved forward, translucent body capturing and refracting the room's light. We have monitored your historical records. You have repeatedly defeated technologically superior opponents through unconventional strategies. The Vietnamese against the Americans, Afghan fighters against Soviet forces, resistance movements against occupying powers. An older diplomat beside Cheryl spoke for the first time, voice crackling like crystal wind chimes. Our war has raged for 3,000 of your years. We have reached an impasse. Both sides understand each other too well. Our strategies have become perfectly predictable. We need something our enemy cannot predict, Cheryl concluded. We need human chaos. Maya looked around at the room of stunned faces. Humanity, barely united, barely spacefaring, was being invited to advise civilizations that could reshape planets. How many advisors would you need? General Chen asked. 300 of your best strategic minds, Cheryl replied. For 3 of your Earth hours. The human delegation erupted in confused murmurs. 3 hours? Maya questioned. To help end a 3,000-year war. The aliens' bioluminescent patterns pulsed in what might have been amusement. Sometimes, Dr. Okafor, The shortest interventions create the most profound changes. The Velosian flagship luminous symmetry dwarfed anything humans had ever constructed. A crystalline structure 17 kilometers long that seemed to bend space-time around its gleaming hull. Colonel Sarah Nakamura stood at the observation deck, watching Earth shrink to a pale blue dot, then vanish entirely as the ship entered what the Velosians called phase space. 300 of us, muttered Major Dmitry Volkov beside her, against a war that's been raging for longer than human civilization has existed. His weathered face reflected the swirling colors of phase space, eyes narrowing with doubt. 300 of our best strategic minds, Sarah corrected. Military historians, game theorists, tactical specialists, cyber warfare experts, quality over quantity. She tapped her tablet, scrolling through the personnel files of their hastily assembled team. The finest military minds Earth could offer, from a dozen nations and disciplines. Still feels like bringing a knife to a supernova, Volkov replied, brushing a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Sarah understood his skepticism. 6 months of intensive preparation after the Velosian arrival had been barely enough time to assemble their team and absorb the most basic understanding of interstellar warfare. Even with the neural language implants the aliens had provided, allowing instant comprehension of Velosian concepts, the technological gap remained staggering. The transition from phase space left several humans nauseated, but the view quickly distracted them from their discomfort. The Velosian military headquarters, a massive installation embedded in an asteroid field, glittered before them, surrounded by thousands of crystalline warships in geometric formations. Their arrival drew curious stares from the native officers. Humans were smaller, softer, and visibly less advanced than any species involved in the conflict. Whispered translations through their neural implants caught fragments of conversation. Primitive, soft shells, temporary allies. Commander Ilara Kavash didn't bother with pleasantries. She met them in a strategic command center larger than a football stadium, dominated by a three-dimensional display showing thousands of star systems. Your species has a reputation for achieving victory despite technological disadvantages, she stated, her translator converting the crystalline harmonics of her native speech. Prove that reputation deserved. Colonel Nakamura studied the massive war table displaying conflicts across thousands of star systems, red marking Arxian territory, blue for Velosian, with shifting purple zones of contested space. Patterns emerged immediately to her trained eye. Standard flanking maneuvers, predictable resource defense, textbook containment strategies, all executed with technology centuries beyond human comprehension, but following principles any first-year military cadet would recognize. Before we propose anything, we need to understand how you fight, she replied. Show us battles you've lost. Show us your worst defeats. The commander bristled visibly, bioluminescent patterns flashing across her exoskeleton in what the human team's xenobiologists identified as irritation or possibly indignation. You question our tactical competence. Our strategic algorithms have been refined over thousands of years. Sarah met the alien commander's compound eyes without flinching. And yet you're losing. Those thousands of years have created patterns your enemy can predict. We need to see exactly how you fight, and then help you learn how not to. The surrounding Velosian officers emitted harmonic tones that the translators struggled to interpret, something between outrage and fascination. Impossible, one senior officer objected. Our battle doctrine is mathematically optimal. That's exactly the problem, Sarah replied. Perfect predictability is a fatal weakness in warfare. Show us your defeats, Commander. Don't waste our time with victories. For several tense moments, Ilara studied the human colonel, her crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. Then she gestured toward the war table. 3,000 years of warfare, she said, her voice resonating with reluctant acceptance. I will show you our failures. As the massive display shifted to show notorious Velosian defeats, Sarah nodded to her team. Their impossible task had begun. Teaching ancient, hyper-advanced aliens, how to think more like humans. Dr. Eliza Mosley had won the Turing Award for her work on pattern recognition in complex systems. Now, surrounded by holographic displays showing 3 millennia of interstellar warfare, she spotted what everyone else had missed. "It's chess," she announced during the 3rd week of analysis, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the strategy room, where the human team had established their operations. Her fellow specialists turned from their workstations. Colonel Nakamura raised an eyebrow. "Chess." "Not literally," Eliza clarified, pushing her glasses up and gesturing toward the swirling holographic battle formations. "But conceptually, both sides are playing a perfect information game with fixed rules. Look at these battle formations. They're solving for Nash equilibrium at every engagement. Their tactical systems are mirror images of each other." The human team gathered around as she pulled up side-by-side comparisons of Volosian and Arxian battle algorithms. Her fingers danced through the holographic interface, highlighting matching patterns in red and blue. The formations are different, the technology varies, but the underlying logic. She traced connecting lines between similar decision nodes. They're descended from the same ancient military AI. Tactical specialist Jun Wang realized, his eyes widening. Different implementations but identical core assumptions. Sarah turned to Commander Ilara, who had been observing silently from the edge of the room, her crystalline form almost motionless. "Your entire approach to warfare is fundamentally similar to your enemies. You're both optimizing for the same variables, using the same core logic." "Of course," Ilara replied, bioluminescent patterns pulsing steadily. "Optimal strategy is optimal strategy. Mathematics is universal." "That's where you're wrong," Dr. Mosley countered, pushing a strand of gray hair behind her ear. "You're both trapped in a local maxima. There are completely different strategic paradigms neither side has explored." Major Volkov moved to the central display, pulling up Earth's military history. Humans have repeatedly won conflicts against technologically superior opponents. The Mongols against Chinese dynasties. Vietnamese guerrillas against American forces. We specialize in asymmetric approaches. He highlighted historical battles where inferior forces defeated superior ones through unconventional tactics. When Genghis Khan's forces faced Chinese armies with more advanced weapons and larger numbers, they used mobility and deception instead of direct confrontation. When American forces in Vietnam deployed overwhelming firepower, the Viet Cong countered with ambushes and underground tunnel networks. "Suboptimal strategies," Commander Ilara said dismissively, her translator rendering the complex harmonics of her speech into a tone of academic superiority. "No," Sarah corrected, stepping forward. "Differently optimal strategies. And that's exactly what you need. An approach your enemy cannot predict because it operates on fundamentally different assumptions." She gestured to the tactical display, showing the most recent Arxian victories. "Look at this pattern. When you deploy a defensive formation here, they counter with this flanking maneuver. When you attempt this feint, they respond with this concentration of forces. They can predict your every move because you think like them." The command center fell silent as the implications settled in. "You're suggesting we abandon 3,000 years of refined tactical doctrine?" a Volosian officer asked, harmonics suggesting deep skepticism. "I'm suggesting you supplement it," Sarah replied. "Your enemy understands perfect efficiency. What they don't understand is beautiful inefficiency, strategies that appear irrational but serve a deeper purpose." Dr. Mosley pulled up a new simulation model. "We've identified 17 distinct strategic paradigms from Earth's military history that operate on fundamentally different assumptions than yours. Guerrilla warfare," Major Volkov added. "Psychological operations. Deception campaigns. Asymmetric approaches that sacrifice efficiency for unpredictability." Sarah met Commander Ilara's compound eyes. "You brought us here because your perfect strategies are failing. Let us show you how to be perfectly imperfect." For the first time since their arrival, Ilara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a configuration the xenobiologists hadn't seen before, perhaps the Volosian equivalent of cautious hope. "Show me," she said simply. The human contingent commandeered a section of the Volosian headquarters, transforming walls into sprawling tactical displays. What emerged shocked the alien observers, a battle plan that violated every principle of their strategic doctrine. "We call it Operation Beautiful Madness," Colonel Nakamura explained to the increasingly intrigued Volosian High Command. The assembled crystalline officers stood in perfect geometric formation, their bioluminescent patterns synchronized in what the human xenobiologists had identified as an expression of collective focus. Sarah gestured to the chaotic-looking deployment patterns on the central display. "Instead of concentrating firepower on optimal targets, we'll disperse into patterns that appear random but serve a hidden purpose." Lieutenant Rosa Garcia, their communication specialist, stepped forward. Her fingers danced through the holographic interface, highlighting key nodes in the enemy command structure. "The Arxians expect you to protect your command and control nodes above all else. Instead, we'll create dozens of decoy nodes while hiding the real ones in apparently vulnerable positions." The Volosian officers chittered nervously among themselves, their harmonics translating as a mixture of alarm and fascination. "This contradicts every principle of efficient warfare," one protested, his crystalline form pulsing with agitated light patterns. "Your deployment sacrifices optimal force distribution for what purpose?" "Exactly," Sarah replied with a tight smile. "That's precisely why they won't see it coming." Dr. Mosley brought up the mathematical models she had constructed. Their prediction algorithms are designed to anticipate optimal responses. When faced with deliberately suboptimal moves, they'll misinterpret your intentions and misallocate their resources. The human team had identified 17 star systems in the Carinae cluster where the new approach could be tested. For the past week, they had worked with reluctant Volosian engineers to modify battle coordination systems, introducing elements that would appear chaotic to enemy observers, while following a meta-strategy invisible to prediction models. In human history, Professor Adebayo explained to fascinated Volosian tacticians, his deep voice carrying across the command center, "We learned that perfect predictability is a fatal weakness. The general who acts exactly as doctrine dictates will lose to one who embraces creative disruption." He displayed famous battles from Earth's past, the Battle of Cannae where Hannibal's forces deliberately weakened their center to draw in the Roman legions, the guerrilla campaigns of T. Lawrence against Ottoman forces, the asymmetric warfare that defined conflicts in Afghanistan across centuries. "Your enemies expect you to value efficiency above all else," Sarah continued. "We'll show you how effective inefficiency can be when deployed with purpose." Major Volkov outlined the specific battle plan. The operation has 3 phases. First, we create apparent weakness that invites aggressive response. Second, we introduce targeted communication disruption. Third, we exploit their confusion with decisive strikes at unexpected vectors. The senior Volosian tactical officer, a veteran of countless engagements, studied the simulations with compound eyes. "Our battle computers predict a 67% probability of catastrophic failure." "Of course they do," Sarah replied. "They're programmed with the same underlying assumptions as the enemy systems. That's the point." After weeks of preparation and heated debate, Commander Ilara entered the strategy room. The assembled officers fell silent as she studied the human battle plan, her crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. "You believe this? Deliberate chaos will succeed where 3,000 years of refined strategy has failed?" she finally asked. Sarah met her gaze steadily. "You requested 3 hours to demonstrate our approach. We're ready to prove its worth." Commander Ilara's decision rippled through her bioluminescent patterns before she spoke. "We will implement your beautiful madness in the Carinae cluster. You requested 3 hours to demonstrate its efficacy. You will have exactly that." As the Volosian officers dispersed to prepare, Major Volkov leaned toward Sarah. 3 hours to end a 3,000-year war. No pressure. Sarah watched the alien commanders departing, their crystalline forms still emanating patterns of doubt and curiosity. Sometimes the shortest interventions create the most profound changes. The modified Volosian fleet emerged from phase space at the edge of the contested region. 17 star systems hung before them like jewels, each bristling with Arxian defenses established over centuries. The Carinae Cluster, a strategic crossroads that had changed hands dozens of times during the Long War, glowed with the artificial light of battle stations and defense platforms. Colonel Nakamura stood beside Commander Ilara on the bridge of the flagship Luminous Symmetry. Holographic displays surrounded them, showing real-time tactical information from across the cluster. The human team had established a makeshift command center alongside the Volosian officers, their equipment interfaced with alien systems through hastily engineered adapters. Enemy detection systems have identified our presence, reported a Volosian tactical officer, her crystalline form pulsing with alert patterns. They are moving to standard intercept formations. Prediction models show 93% probability they will concentrate forces against our apparent vanguard. Sarah nodded to Dr. Mosley, who activated their custom battle coordination system. The human algorithm, deliberately designed to appear chaotic while following a deeper pattern, took control of the fleet's movement protocols. "Execute Phase Hydra," Sarah ordered. The Volosian fleet suddenly split into 5 seemingly vulnerable groups, each moving toward different targets simultaneously. From the Arxian perspective, it would look like a catastrophic command failure, forces dispersing when they should concentrate, violating every principle of efficient space warfare. The Volosian officers watched nervously, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with anxiety. Even Commander Ilara's composed demeanor showed signs of strain, her inner crystalline structure vibrating at frequencies the human sensors could barely detect. "Movement patterns confirmed," reported Major Volkov, monitoring the enemy response. "Arxian forces are repositioning exactly as predicted." The enemy fleet, detecting apparent weakness in the Volosian formation, did exactly what 3,000 years of optimal strategy dictated. They concentrated overwhelming firepower against what their models identified as the most threatening Volosian battle group. "They took the bait," Volkov announced, unable to keep a note of satisfaction from his voice. "Their formation exactly matches our prediction model." Sarah nodded, her expression calm but focused. "Now for the trap. Execute Pattern Tesseract." What appeared to be a disorganized retreat suddenly transformed. The scattered Volosian forces moved in precise, coordinated maneuvers that made no sense to conventional tactical doctrine, but served to surround the concentrated Arxian forces. "Fire distortion missiles," ordered Sarah. Instead of conventional weapons, the Volosians launched specialized devices that the human team had helped design, not to destroy but to confuse. The missiles penetrated Arxian defensive screens calibrated to stop destructive payloads, then unleashed targeted electromagnetic pulses that disrupted the enemy ship's sensor systems. Unable to accurately target their weapons and confused by the unconventional Volosian formations, the Arxian commanders fell back on program responses the human team had precisely predicted. "They're attempting to regroup along standard defensive parameters," reported a Volosian officer, surprise evident in her harmonics. "Just as you predicted." "Of course," Dr. Mosley replied. "When faced with uncertainty, they default to established protocols. The same protocols they've used for centuries." Sarah turned to Commander Ilara. "Now, while their command structure is attempting to reprocess the situation, execute Targeting Protocol Omega." 3 Volosian battle groups simultaneously struck key Arxian command vessels from unexpected vectors. The precision strikes, coming from directions the enemy had left exposed while focusing on the apparent main threat, created cascading failures throughout their formation. The bridge fell silent as the results appeared on tactical displays. The first hour ended with 3 Arxian capital ships captured intact and a major defensive installation neutralized, with 0 Volosian casualties. "Impossible," whispered a senior Volosian officer, crystalline appendages trembling as she studied the battle data. "In 3,000 years of warfare, We've never achieved such a decisive advantage without significant losses. Commander Ilara turned to Colonel Nakamura, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic battle displays. 1 hour has passed. Your approach has proven unexpectedly effective. Sarah nodded, already reviewing the data for the next phase. That was just the opening move, Commander. The real game is just beginning. As the battle entered its second hour, the human team gathered around their tactical display. Holographic projections showed the Arxian fleet attempting to reorganize after their initial confusion, their formation shifting into new defensive patterns. They're adapting, Lieutenant Garcia warned, her fingers dancing through data streams. Their tactical algorithms are already modifying parameters to account for our unconventional movements. Perfect, Sarah replied with a tight smile. That's exactly what we want them to do. She nodded to Dr. Mosley, who activated the next phase of their battle plan. Operation Beautiful Madness had been designed not as a single surprise, but as a series of cascading disruptions, each building on the previous. Initiating Phase Dionysus, Mosley announced, naming the second phase after the Greek god of creative chaos. The next phase targeted the Arxian communication structure. Using the captured enemy vessels secured during the first hour, the Velosians broadcast contradictory orders, false retreat signals, and system disruption patterns across all Arxian command frequencies. Their entire command structure relies on perfect information flow, explained communications specialist Amir Tirani, monitoring the electromagnetic spectrum. We're introducing just enough misinformation to trigger cascading uncertainty. On tactical displays, the Arxian response became increasingly erratic. Ships moved to defend positions that weren't threatened or abandoned crucial installations based on phantom attack warnings. Battle groups received contradictory orders and hesitated at critical moments. Commander Ilara watched in astonishment, her crystalline form vibrating with what the human xenobiologists had identified as intense focus. Their coordination has never faltered like this in recorded history. Because you've never attacked their fundamental assumptions before, Sarah explained, studying the battle data. You've been fighting the symptoms, not the disease. As the confusion spread through enemy ranks, Major Volkov directed the next stage of the attack. Deploy the stealth squadrons toward the secondary targets. Small, specialized Velosian vessels, modified according to human specifications to minimize energy signatures, slipped through gaps in the disorganized Arxian defensive screen. Rather than targeting obvious military objectives, they struck at seemingly minor infrastructure. Communication relays, sensor arrays, and navigational beacons. In human naval warfare, Volkov explained to the watching Velosian officers, cutting an enemy's communication lines can be more devastating than destroying their battleships. By the midpoint of the second hour, 7 more star systems had been reclaimed by Velosian forces. The Arxian defensive network, designed to function as an integrated whole, began to fracture as individual commanders lost faith in their tactical information and fell back on local decision-making. They're experiencing what humans call decision paralysis, Dr. Mosley noted with professional satisfaction. Examining the sensor readings showing Arxian command vessels flooding the electromagnetic spectrum with contradictory signals. When trusted systems produce contradictory recommendations, hierarchical command structures collapse. One of the Velosian tactical officers, initially the most skeptical of the human approach, turned toward Colonel Nakamura. Your strategy appears inexplicably effective. But surely the enemy will eventually recognize the pattern and adapt. That's the beauty of it, Sarah replied. There is no single pattern to recognize. What looks like chaos to their systems actually contains dozens of overlapping microstrategies, each one designed to trigger specific responses that feed into the next disruption. Commander Ilara studied the tactical display, her compound eyes tracking multiple battle zones simultaneously. 2 of their primary dreadnoughts have gone completely silent. Their central command node appears to be initiating emergency isolation protocols. They're cutting themselves off from potentially compromised communications, Major Volkov explained. which means they're now fighting as individual units rather than a coordinated force. As the second hour came to a close, the Archean fleet had lost cohesion across the entire cluster. Individual ship commanders, unable to trust the information they were receiving, either retreated to defensive positions or launched uncoordinated attacks that the Velosian forces easily countered. Sarah turned to Commander Ilara, determination in her eyes. 2 hours down, 1 to go. Now we deliver the final blow. As the operation entered its final hour, the human team gathered for a brief strategy session. The tactical display showed the Carinae cluster transformed, Archean forces scattered and disorganized, Velosian ships advancing across multiple fronts. This is the moment that determines whether we've simply won a battle or changed the course of the war, Colonel Nakamura told her team, her voice steady but intense. It's time for the masterstroke. Using the captured Archean vessels and compromised communication channels, they prepared to deploy the culmination of Operation Beautiful Madness, directly targeting the shared assumptions in the enemy's strategic paradigm. Their entire military doctrine assumes that all rational opponents will seek optimal efficiency according to fixed variables, Sarah explained to the gathered Velosian command staff. When that assumption fails, their entire strategic framework collapses. Dr. Mosley activated the complex algorithm they had prepared, not a virus or conventional hacking attempt, but a conceptual attack on the very foundations of Archean military thought. The captured ships began broadcasting detailed records of the battle so far, complete with explicit analyses of how non-optimal strategies had systematically defeated textbook responses. We're not just showing them that they're losing, Lieutenant Garcia explained. We're showing them exactly why they're losing, and that their entire approach to warfare is fundamentally flawed. The effect spread through the Archean command structure like wildfire. The data packets were impossible for their tactical systems to categorize as either misinformation or valid intelligence, creating a paradox that their analytical frameworks couldn't resolve. On the tactical displays, Archean ships began exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior. Some commanders, recognizing the futility of continuing under failed doctrine, surrendered. Others attempted desperate, uncoordinated attacks. Still others retreated entirely, abandoning strategic positions their forces had held for centuries. They're experiencing cognitive collapse, Professor Adebayo observed. Their entire framework for understanding warfare is disintegrating in real time. 2 hours and 40 minutes into the operation, the central Archean command nexus in the cluster transmitted a system-wide stand-down order. 7 minutes later, their planetary governor requested terms of surrender. 2 hours and 53 minutes after the battle began, the last Archean stronghold in the 17-system cluster transmitted formal surrender protocols. The Velosian command center erupted in harmonics that the translators rendered as everything from astonishment to jubilation. Commander Ilaric Vosh approached Colonel Nakamura as the victory confirmation streamed in. You achieved in 3 hours what we couldn't accomplish in 3,000 years, she acknowledged, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with complex emotions the human xenobiologists struggled to interpret. Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of exhaustion. The longest conflicts persist not because victory is impossible, but because both sides are locked into symmetrical thinking. Sometimes you need an outside perspective to break that symmetry. Within days, news of the unprecedented victory spread throughout both galactic powers. The Archean High Command, facing a threat they couldn't quantify within existing strategic frameworks, requested an immediate armistice to reassess fundamental tactical parameters. As peace negotiations began, representatives from dozens of previously uninvolved species approached Earth with diplomatic overtures. Humanity's reputation transformed overnight from primitive newcomers to strategic innovators. Dr. Maya Okafor, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the newly formed Galactic Concord, reflected on the irony during a private communication with Colonel Nakamura. We ended a 3,000-year war not because we were more advanced, she observed, but precisely because we weren't. Our willingness to embrace the unexpected, What they now call human thinking was exactly what the situation required. Sarah smiled, looking out at the stars from the observation deck of the Velosian diplomatic vessel returning her team to Earth. Perhaps that's our species' greatest contribution to the galaxy. We're just unpredictable enough to be interesting. As Earth took its place in the galactic community, the term human thinking entered the lexicon of multiple civilizations, simultaneously meaning unconventional, creatively disruptive, and surprisingly effective. The species that had barely ventured beyond its own solar system had forever changed the nature of galactic warfare, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the uniquely human talent for thinking beyond established patterns and embracing beautiful madness when the situation demanded it.